Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore, and welcome to another edition of the Palast Report with investigative journalist Greg Palast, who joins us from New York. He's, as I said, investigative journalist who does a lot of work for BBC television. He writes for The Nation and Rolling Stone, and his new book is Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. Thanks very much for joining us, Greg.
Paul, a pleasure again.
So you've been working on the Supreme Court review of the Voting Rights Act.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Supreme Court's been kind of working on us. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is what I call the Martin Luther King Dream Act. It was 50 years ago this year that King in front of the Lincoln Memorial said he had a dream. And the dream included that any person, any American citizen can vote, no matter their color. What a radical idea. And the Voting Rights Act was the enactment of that dream. Now we have a nightmare Supreme Court, or the Ku Klux Court, as some people might want to call it after hearing the arguments and hearing them yesterday. What the court has decided to do under the push of Chief Justice Roberts is to hollow out the Voting Rights Act. You leave the title up there, but take out the mechanism for enforcing the Voting Rights Act. And what that mechanism is called Section 5 Preclearance. Preclearance has nothing to do with acne medicine that clears up your skin. It's kind of democracy medicine that prevents old Jim Crow states from changing their rules to shaft, purge, eliminate, block, intimidate voters of color. For example, it says you cannot change a rule unless the Justice Department reviews the rule and says, okay, that doesn't knock out too many black voters.
So, Greg, give us an example of some of the rules you're talking about.
Okay, let me give you an example. In the year 2000, a lady named Katherine Harris, Secretary of State of Florida, at the goading of Jeb Bush governor, purged over 58,000 people from the voter rolls of Florida. Most of them were African Americans. The grounds were that they were criminals, felons, not allowed to vote in Florida. 58,000. Well, of those 58,000, exactly, and here's the interesting point, Paul, exactly zero were illegal voters. I met a Gulf War veteran, Willie Steen, who showed up at the polls with his son and said to vote. They want to show his 5-year-old son what Martin Luther King had done for them. He was told, you're a felon, you can't vote. So now, if Florida tries to purge its voter rolls, it has to clear it with the U.S. Department of Justice. And they did try it again. The current governor of Florida, just this past year, Rick Scott, said he had 180,000 names of illegal alien voters. 180,000. Now remember, voting, if you're an alien, is a crime in the United States. It's a go to jail, then get deported crime. So did they arrest anyone, the tough Mr. Governor Scott? Yes, out of 100, and here's the interesting thing. They were blocked by the U.S. Justice Department from removing the names of 180,000 voters from the voter rolls of Florida. 180,000, mostly Hispanics, of course, mostly Democrats, of course. Out of the 180,000, they had evidence to arrest one, who is a Republican from Austria. Okay, that's it. In other words, these purges are purely, basically it's a changing of white sheets to spreadsheets and using that to wipe out voters of color.
So go back to the case the Supreme Court is reviewing and some of the specifics involved.
What's being reviewed is the right of the Justice Department to say, no, you can't wipe out 180,000 Hispanic Democratic voters on some weird suspicion based on some strange computer algorithm that basically is some type of Jim Crow, cybernetic Jim Crow.
So go back to what happened in the courtroom when the lawyers were presenting their briefs, because the reaction of some of the judges was interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that a former civil rights attorney in the Justice Department said that Scalia's comments were so racist that the crosses burned themselves. What Judge Scalia, I should say, Scalia had said was that the Voting Rights Act, oh, what a nice name. Congress will never do anything to stop this thing, but, It's just another case of special privilege for some racial group. Special, yeah. You know, in fact, that special privilege, sir, the Voting Rights Act did not grant black people the right to vote. That was granted by something called the Civil War. A lot of dead bodies. In fact, you may have seen the movie recently, Mr. Justice Scalia. In 1870, the 15th Amendment gave black people in America and Hispanic people and Jewish people and Mormons the right to vote because they didn't have it. Okay, and that was 1870, 15th Amendment. It took nearly 100 years, till 65, to get a law that would allow Congress to enforce it. And the only way to enforce it is to say, before you come up with cockamamie voting rules, like poll taxes, like felon purges, like illegal alien purges, gerrymandering of districts, you know, all kinds of tricks that are used to knock out voters of colors. We have to have this preclearance. And it's only the preclearance which was before the court. Justice Roberts, and I use the name Justice only because that's how it's printed. Justice Roberts, who is the Chief Justice, has said that the Voting Rights Act was a wonderful thing. It served its purpose. But now we have, hey, look at, we've got a black president. We've got a lot of black officials. Does that mean Jim Crow is dead? No. It means it's gotten very, very, very sophisticated. It doesn't mean it's gone just because we have black officials. So he is stepping in the way of the United States Congress, which is already chosen to reenact this law because it expires every 20 years. And I have to say that he's right about one thing, Justice Roberts, that there is no reason to pick on the South, because in the preclearance section, only 16 states are subject to that preclearance rule.
So the preclearance we're talking about is that the 16 states have to run any rule changes by the Justice Department before they can implement them.
That's the game. If they can't play any elections games, they can't change the ballots, no butterfly ballots, no tricks, no games.
So the issue you're raising is it just shouldn't be those 16 states, because it's not just those states that are playing games.
Well, in fact, I'm sitting in a preclearance state called New York. Why is New York suddenly part of the Confederacy that needs special scrutiny? The answer is the Puerto Rican vote in New York. People come from Puerto Rico are American citizens. They serve more. It's a state, not part of the Union yet, but it is an American state which provides more people per capita to the military than any other state. And that's where our Marines come from. And then when they leave the Marine Corps and stay in New York, they can vote. But the state of New York did a very good job in knocking out Hispanic voters. So we got on the Jose Crow list of the Justice Department. And then there was a guy named Ronald Reagan, a great civil rights leader who extended the Voting Rights Act preclearance provisions to his own state of California. That was, by the way, after he did his I Have a Nap speech. So even Reagan understood that voting rights are American rights. It's part of the Constitution. And and Reagan expanded the Voting Rights Act to California and Arizona, Alaska, by the way, where Alaskan natives faced all kinds of discrimination votes, including, again, ballots that are printed only in English when they speak several other native languages. Very few at the time in the 70s spoke English or could read it. Wasn't their language. But they're still Americans, and they pay more taxes than most of us.
When do you expect the Supreme Court to render a decision on this?
By June, we expect the court to issue its decisions. They have agreed, though they've already taken a vote, that they will not wear their white hoods, only their black robes. And we do expect a decision, I would say, in which preclearance will be dropped by the Supreme Court, which will basically destroy the King Dream Act. But there is a solution. The Ronald Reagan solution of all things, which is to expand preclearance. Reagan expanded it from 6 states to 7 states to 16 states. It is now time to give everyone in America the protection of Justice Department review. I was in Ohio, Paul, on Election Day, and the election weekend for the souls to the polls voting by black folk. You'll see me in lines, walking the lines of black voters in Ohio, where they are waiting 3, 4, and 5 hours in freezing parking lots to vote. I then drove up to a suburb of Toledo to check out the lines there. And I couldn't because there were no lines. You'll see me standing in front of an empty polling station except for the couple people inside. There are fewer voters than there are voting machines. That's the type of Jim Crow stuff that's just got to end. And when our president says, gee, someone ought to do something about that, yeah, you should, Mr. President, you should, Congress, we should. And so one way to overcome a Ku Klux court is to take the preclearance provision and make it nationwide, right. Provide it to Old Dixie in Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, and to New Dixie in Ohio and Pennsylvania, New York, and California.
Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.